Welcome to a very special episode of Receivables Roundtable. I'd like to introduce our guest today, the man, the myth, and the legend, Mr. Adam Parks, the CEO, the founder of Branding Arc, here today. He's invited me in as a special guest host today. Today is his 100th Receivables Roundtable episode. Unbelievably, if you haven't seen the previous Receivables Roundtable episodes, go check them out. But after 100 shows, no one really gets to ask Adam the question. So I was honored he asked me here today to his home to personally interview him. And we're going to ask him some hard questions, but the hardest question right out of the gate for all the guests, Adam, for those that don't know who you are, tell me a little bit about yourself and how you got to be in the position today.
So out of college, I was in immigration law doing EB-5 investment visas, doing hotel syndications for EB-5. It was a good business, but it was the end of the real estate market in the early 2000s. As we saw the crash coming, I had a friend that was working for a company called Credit Max, and he was involved in debt buying. And I said, that sounds like an interesting business. Let me go see if I want to do that. And so I started working at Credit Max, was there for a couple of years, became a founding partner at Sterling Capital Management with Ed Forbes, was in the brokerage business for a little while, eventually sold that back to Ed, and started to focus my time on marketing. So I started Branding Arc when nobody really cared or even had a website in the receivables management space. And so I started working in that space. As Dodd-Frank came to town and the CFPB was born, I got involved with CompliArm, and I was the founder there, where we wrote policies and procedures for a number of agencies, debt buyers, creditors, law firms, and all that. Love the mower shows up at just this moment in time. So got a chance to work on the compliance side, build some software, sold that to Pravana in 2019 so I could focus back on being a debt buyer and spending time with Branding Arc. On the marketing side and doing communications and Receivables Info and the roundtables and all the fun I get to have today. Also became, during that time period, I've been on the RMAI board, where I'm currently serving as president of the Receivables Management Association International.
I'm going to wrap this all back up into one thing, because I think that for our listeners that don't know who Adam is, and to kind of try to distill these things down into something bite-sized, easy to understand. Adam, you've been involved not just from a hospitality side of things where you started, but you've moved on not just to large debt buyers, but to brokerages. And you finally settled into your niche. And that niche is a true niche in this space. I've been in the space for 22 years. I don't know of any single company that specifically markets to what branch, Adam? I know it's financial services, but I think it's more specific than just financial services. Tell me a little bit about what it is you really drilled down into.
So our focus is on that consumer interaction. Every word that's being read, every word that you communicate, whether it be from a PR perspective or a marketing perspective, every word's being read by at least three audiences, right? The regulator, the consumer, and the client simultaneously. And so mastering the balance of that language, understanding the journey for each one of the stakeholders that is affiliated or associated with your organization is really where we've thrived. And when we first started a marketing company, I did a lot of work for restaurants and nightclubs and all kinds of local businesses and all that. And I just don't do any of that anymore. Our total and undivided focus is on the receivables management space and perfecting the language and the playbook that's necessary, not just from a proactive marketing, go find new client perspective, but also a defensive perspective in understanding what these ambulance chasing consumer attorneys are doing, watching their every move and assisting the industry with playing on that chessboard that we're not really built to understand. It requires content creation, talking about who we are as organizations. And I've been able to create that playbook and the content necessary to make that a successful endeavor. But we find this perfect balance between marketing and compliance, right? Any RFI that you complete for a bank, what is it? It's got to be that perfect balance of compliance and marketing. And we understand the language, and we've been able to create a massive differentiator for ourselves because of the simple fact that this is all we do. If you go and hire a marketing company from Madison Avenue, you have to explain to them what debt buying is, or what a collection agency is, and the FDCPA, and what they can and can't say, and how they can and can't say it. We don't need to be taught those things. That's what we live and breathe every day. So we find ourselves in a very unique position working on communications in the space.
You touch on so many really interesting points. And before I ask you another question, I want to ask you something you brought up within the context, and something that has become just so much more critical in the last 4 to 5 years, especially, and that's reputational management. I think we can all agree that the Secondary Receivables Management Association, anything that has to do with defaulted debts, oftentimes we make this comparison, animal testing or these things like that. But really, at the end of the day, I think that this industry has evolved tremendously, especially over the last 10 years, especially in the time frame that you've identified. From a reputation management perspective, it's a two-part question. The first part is, how important is reputation management? I think everyone understands how important that reputation is, but how many companies out there really understand how to properly manage their own reputations in this new online world? I think a lot of companies for a long time were happy to do what they did. And I think that as we've seen data becoming a much larger component of these decisions we're making, how important is that? And more importantly, how does Branding Arc, how does the team, and how do you kind of lead the charge in ensuring that your clients are benefiting kind of beyond the scope of what they're accustomed to?
So I think when you look at reputation management in this space, you have to consider the fact of, again, it being a defensive strategy, which plays a lot of different parts, because defensive strategy 10 years ago meant, oh, we're going to pay people to build all these links and it's going to be great, right? And you could trick the Google algorithm to some level. And now the reality is it's all based on content. So it's about, can you create good and positive content about your organization, and what are you going to say, and where are you going to say it? And is it always going to be you talking about yourself, or are you going to find opportunities for others to talk about you, or to discuss the community involvement that you have? And I've done quite a few roundtables with people from around the space, asking them about the different things that they do in the communities, because some of the best companies that I know, best run companies, best known companies, tightest operators in this space have the worst search results, because it's not something that they concern themselves with. And the lawsuits that they're taking on from the Lembergs and DiPetrillos of the world that are attacking them online is just a cost of doing business for them. But at the same time, you could be creating some positive content about your organization, using it to land more clients, improve the visibility of your organization from the consumer's perspective. Because a consumer gets a letter in the mail from a company, what's the first thing they're going to do? They're going to Google you from their phone. Now think about what I just said there. They're going to go and check your search results, but they're also going to do it from a mobile device, most likely. Just because we all live on desktop computers all day does not mean that the world does. And so I think by understanding even just the channels in which you're trying to communicate and what options you have available, right? What tools do you have in place that enable you to do that? And we literally created the Receivables Info website as another mechanism by which to help our clients talk about the great things that they were doing in the communities, to talk about what are they doing online, what are they doing in person, what kind of engagement do they have, what conferences are they going to, right? And creating kind of a neutral place for people to have a discussion in the space, which I felt like was a real opportunity here. So for us, like when we talk about the reputation management, it comes down to, we've got some really defined factors. We hired an SEO director from Google, brought in the right minds at the right time, and now we're developing custom proprietary software that helps us understand what's happening in the digital battleground on an aggregate basis day by day. Because every time I search for a company name, I may get a slightly different result. So we have to collect all this data, aggregate that data, visualize that data, and then use that to plan the content and strategies that we're affecting for our end user clients, which is why we have so many great clients in this space, because we know this particular space. We do just this in 9 countries. This is our whole world is receivables management. So we're looking at those finite details and those battle lines between these negative search engine results, the positive search engine results, and we understand that the engine behind all of that is good content being created. And I'm not going to say that everybody's not capable of sitting down and writing a press release or doing that. And that's great. But if you're a CEO, is that really the best use of your time and energy? Or do you want a PR group that does communications? Because collection agencies are 80% the same for the most part, right? 80%, that 20% is what makes you special. My job is to learn what's special about each one of these organizations and then to help them make that shine through. I was talking to a creditor at the CRS conference back in May who said we were talking about presentations and decks and those kinds of things. And they're like, if I see more than 3 slides about compliance in your deck, I just throw it away. And I said, fair enough, but that was a big deal 2, 3, 4, 5 years ago. What's the difference now? It's table stakes. And I think that staying on top of those communications and those communication trends and how it's being viewed by the person that's receiving it is such an important aspect that we're uniquely tuned to understand.
No, and Adam, it's hard having watched so many episodes of Receivables Roundtable, having followed the journey that you've made. I personally have, I could ask you questions probably for the next 2 hours. But I do want to ask, to touch on a point you made, 80%, 20%. Most agencies are 80% the same, 20% different. I'm not going to ask you clearly what that secret 20% is. I think we can all, for those that have grown up in this space, can acknowledge 15 years ago, so few people shared that common experience. Having gone through so much adversity, whether it was GLBA and then moving on to the CFPB's creation, moving on into the more current Hunstein or Regulation F type challenges, I think that the entire industry has kind of risen together because they realize that that 80% is consistent. It's a shared experience. And so, you know, it's interesting to hear that it's that 20% that still differentiates. And I think that some of that is that statistical advantage when you start talking about, you know, what steps are you making to make sure that you're looking at those next steps, those next technologies in the space. And I think that's one of the things, Adam, that I'd like to at least ask you about is where does AP, where does Adam Parks get his news? Where does Adam Parks and how does Adam Parks stay on top of the leading technologies in this space?
So Branding Arc is a member of all the trade associations. We're watching the member alerts. We're watching the news as it comes through as an industry. We're monitoring all of the different news. But then we've got our custom feeds where I'm pulling all of the press releases and blog posts from a variety of different government regulators, and I've got one filter. So I'm able to sit there, filter through that news, and then distill that out to my team. But I think one of the things that we've done that's been really different here is by actually hiring journalists, right? So by having somebody with a journalist background and being able to provide the information, I've got someone who's reporting back to me just the facts and not telling me how I'm supposed to feel about it. Because to be perfectly frank, I don't need to be told how to feel about it. I just need to know what happened. Give me some facts. Give me a link to the report or the press release so I can read the real words myself and let me digest and distill that. Now, that's not to say that there shouldn't be broader industry strategic discussions and those kinds of things, but that's not what I'm looking for. I'm looking for dragnet. I want just the facts.
No, I think that's a great point, Adam. And I think it's an important distinction. There's a lot of news and a lot of that news is replicated. And so I think it is important, having both served on the board of directors, having both volunteered our times in making sure that the legislation, the regulation, and the regulators themselves understand that we haven't been that adversarial. We haven't taken this adversarial tone. And as you know, so much of what's happened over the last 10 years has been almost in conjunction, making sure that the relationship with the CFPB is one of communication and understanding that unintended consequences are oftentimes the result of poorly discussed topics. And I think that it's been an interesting journey in the last eight to 10 years, especially in those that have been able to rise to that occasion, that have been able to step back from their own policies and procedures and kind of realize that while the barrier to entry has certainly gotten taller, I think the tools allowing you to be successful have only grown exponentially. So talk to me a little bit about, that was kind of a two-parter. You told me where you got your news, but how does Adam, as someone that is deeply nerdy, and I'm happy to translate any geek to non-geek after your answer if necessary, Adam, but how does Adam stay on top of the technologies? The same way as the news, or it's, I know you travel a lot. And so I'm trying to drill down into, how much of that is spent in evaluating the new products are out there that are a value add, or how do you identify the technologies that are changing the way that people operate in this space?
So as someone who's not actively running a call center, right? Like I'm actively involved in the debt buying space, but I'm not running a call center. And so I realized that there's a kind of a little bit of a separation there. And I think as we look at kind of the industry and understanding the technology is talking not just to the vendors. So I talk to the vendors, I learn what they think they're pitching. And then I go talk to their clients and I hear what the client thinks they're being pitched. And I try and figure out where that middle ground is, because the truth lies somewhere in between what the seller thinks they're selling and what the buyer thinks they're buying. And so I'm always looking at that little niche down the center and saying, does this actually make sense? Okay, I heard your pitch. Does this actually make sense? Right? If I think that it makes sense because I've done enough policy and procedure and operational work that I have a deep understanding of how these things go into play in reality. So my bullshit filter is probably a little thicker than most. But at the same time, then I'm just going to go talk to the people that are actively using. What do you like? What don't you like? What happened? You started using this new product. I heard all about it. You're in 7 press releases. What's the result? It's great that you had it, right? Like we always see the press release about I got a new relationship. We never see the press release about what happened afterwards.
That's right. No, it's a great point.
And so for me, that's where I'm trying to look is I'm going back to dig through those press releases and say, who's using that piece of technology and who should I talk with? And, that might be open to speaking. And so I think it's important. I think it's honestly, it's a lot of fun too, to be able to poke around these technologies and to get a better feel for it. I think most organizations have been very open with me about, we have this new piece of technology because they want me to be talking about it or discussing it with my friends, over a drink at the bar or whatever. So I think it's become part of that conversation. Organizations are open with like, here's what we're trying to go. Here's what we're trying to do. Can help us get there. And in some cases, I'm working with technology companies to understand what's in the marketplace. And I also like to collect a lot of information, right? Like I've got a database full of information. I want to know everybody's favorite football team, what they drink for coffee, and what technology they're using, so that when I have a question about XYZ dialer system, I know who to call. Or somebody's shopping dialers, let me call these 3 people and see what they're thinking these days, because not everybody has that access. And honestly, that's why we came up with our 5-minute pitch series, because for me, number one, it takes 5 minutes to walk from the casino floor to the conference area at the Aria Hotel for RMAI. And I used to let people all the time, they're talking to me as I'm starting to walk down to the conference.
The walk and talk.
Right? And I'll say, you got exactly 5 minutes, ready to go. Right? And I'll listen to that whole pitch and we'll have that discussion all the way to the conference floor. I'm probably on my way to a meeting or to do whatever it is for the association. And so that's where that came from, because what I realized is that people want to hear these little blurbs about the technology. They want to get 5 minutes of like, what is this thing? Right? And so once we get past the what is this thing, now they get 5 minutes. You want to demo, you want to do whatever, I'll put it on YouTube, but you had the opportunity to pitch me. And I like to hear those pitches too, because I think when you distill it down to that 5-minute block, I'm getting to the heart of what product are you actually selling. I walked up to a booth at a conference recently and asked them what they did. And they told me where they got their money from. They told me, how many investors they have and, that they're 6 contracts that they're ready to sign and all these other things. But in 3 minutes, they didn't even tell me what would you say you do here?
Yeah.
Right? Like,
how can I help you be successful?
It was very office.
Yeah.
I just wanted to know what you do here. I wasn't even trying to buy it or sell it. I just wanted to understand, what is it that you do?
Yeah.
And I couldn't get a straight response in 3 minutes. So for me, if I can distill it down between what they think they're selling and what the buyer thinks they bought, somewhere in the middle there is reality.
I love that. All right. Hard-hitting questions, Adam.
Hit it.
Detractors have said, and look, as not just your friend, as someone that served with you on the board, detractors out there have said, Adam Parks is not a debt buyer. Well, how does Adam Parks respond to that? Now, I know it's a bit of like we didn't practice these questions. To the audience out there, I've been scribbling away in a notebook. Adam had no idea any of these questions were coming. So how do you respond to your detractors out there that say, Adam, you're not a debt buyer?
I got money in the pools like everybody else. I'm not really sure how to address it at this point. I mean, I've been the chief marketing officer for a debt buying operation for quite some time. I've been actively involved in the space for decades. I've actively traded over $26 billion worth of receivables. I mean, I've been involved in countless transactions from countless different angles, and I still buy today. Why be in the space? Why donate all the time? Why do all of this if it's not to protect an industry? And for me, that's number one. All the businesses that I'm, most actively involved in are in this space. And I did vertically integrate myself, right? Like, you sell a company, you have to find new ways to deploy your capital. And so I deployed across the space and found myself in a number of different places. And to be honest with you, I'm very glad that I did. It put me in a position to collect unique information and knowledge. However, it also has put me in a position where you get a question like that, right? Like, are you a debt buyer? Like, of course I'm a debt buyer. Of course I've been putting money into the pools here. I invest in a lot of weird things, though. So I guess that's a fair enough question.
I'm not trying to jump to your defense here. As you know, Mark Naiman didn't have that question. Mark Naiman is not a detractor. In fact, Mark Naiman has always looked at it as, I think any association benefits from having such a variegated group of people, and the type of things that you brought to this association, especially during a point of rebranding, Adam. And again, I'm not going to bore any of our audiences with these things, but to me, I think it's super interesting to see that. I think the industry is constantly changing. Quite, speaking frankly, Adam, I think that we're in a very transitional period, not just receivables management, but from a financial perspective, with the rise of fintech, with the rise of these alternate lending facilities. We're really starting to see this kind of transition. Now, do I think receivables management is going away? Of course not. And that's why we continue doing what we do on a daily basis. My question is, when you to me, it's a unique advantage being able to bring the expertise from a marketing perspective, being able to lend that expertise to the association. As your time as president on the board, you are currently president, moving into past president, I think in February of 2023. What have been some of your big initiatives, Adam? Like, what if you could say, as a legacy, as president of this association, these are the things, this is the one thing that I really tried to do in my time there?
So, I mean, the first thing that I was recruited by, existing board members when I first joined the board, and I want to say it was about 8 years ago, was the rebranding, was looking at DBA International to Receivables Management Association International. And what did that mean? And how did we execute on that? What did it look like? And how did it carry forward? But then also being able to affect change on a larger scale outside of the association by updating hundreds of websites for hundreds of different organizations in the space, to not say the ARM industry or the collections industry, to say the receivables management industry, and to actually affect that language and change. And by affecting that change across all of our clients' marketing materials, decks, websites, right, we were actually able to affect change in language in conjunction with what was happening from an association perspective, which was incredibly important. In my time on the board, we also started this regional event that had, very successful events in Chicago, Atlanta, and now DC. That was one of my big initiatives, or something that I felt really strong about. Legislative fundraising and improving communication. If you recognize, years ago, we started communicating. When I first got on the board, we were communicating to the donor base by just saying we need money. And then we started creating these infographics and other things that help people understand where that money went and what we were doing, and the communications that we were sending out, and the timing of those communications. And for me, communications is my background, right? Of all the other things that I do, my undergraduate is more finance related, but my master's degree or my MBA had a focus on marketing. And I had an opportunity to work with some incredible professors. One of my professors from college actually invented the gold card, for Amex, and helped them to deploy that, right? So I've always been interested in the financial services space and the marketing of financial services. And so for me, if I could come into the association, I could help to defend the legacy that was here before me, because somebody took me by the hand my first couple of years in the industry and walked me around. The Mike Colby's, the Tom Hicks, I could, like Ben Dixon, I could go on forever with all these people that just grabbed me by the hand with no value to themselves. I didn't work for them, right? They just walked me around and did it. And now I feel like it's my obligation and opportunity to do the same for others. And so at every conference, I try and spend time with some new people that have never been there before, make a bunch of introductions for them. Look, I can't get them deals. That's not what I'm there to do. I'm there to provide a a reasonable opportunity for them to develop their own personal relationships with others, but hopefully they can blossom themselves into an actual business relationship. But we can only do so much from that perspective. And I feel like we've done an incredible amount. I've been blessed to work with an RMAI board that has a variety of different expertise. We've got some people that are incredible lawyers and they understand the legislative landscape from a federal, or they have really niche state knowledge, and it's incredible to learn from such a great group of people. And I feel like we have a great balance between those that are focused on kind of the compliance point of view, those that are focused on the deal point of view, and as everything in life, you got to find balance there. And I'm incredibly proud of what this association has continued to accomplish. Its response to COVID, the getting a new website up, starting to create video content, the revamp to the social. Again, all communications focused things. And so like my focus on my time on the board outside of being president, I was almost always on the legislative fundraising, the editorial, membership committees. Like those were the areas where I could add the biggest value. So that's where I spent my time.
But as the environment changed, it almost was meant to be in some ways, right? As legislative activity slowed down a little bit, here you were able to lend this unique expertise to, the rebranding was one thing, but carrying through with that, as you stated earlier, right? The press release is one thing, but it's the carry through. And I think that everything you said is resonates, especially from me. It's hard to remove the hat because I lived through all of it and understand it quite well. From an audience perspective, it's fascinating to me being able to interview Adam in his own studio. Very strange for me, by the way. But I hope that this has given our listeners, the listeners to Receivables Roundtable, a unique insight into Adam. He has a unique product in this space. This is not something that there's any competitors. If there's a branding arc booth in the room, they're the only people that do what they do in this space. And it's something that I've always been drawn towards. And Adam, you had a hell of a team. I hope I can say that. Is that going to be edited out? We might have to edit that.
You're good.
It's okay. We're good. I'm going to leave this one last question. Being able to peer behind the curtain, knowing members of the team that you've had for so long. What's that one, as a business owner, Adam, leave us with that one piece of business owner advice. How do you run such an effective team? This is the final statement for the roundtable. As the owner of Branding Arc, as the CEO, what's the most important thing to you in making sure that you continue running best team in the space?
Empower your team.
Yeah.
Empower your team and get out of the way. For me, I was always a micro control freak until 2020, really. My mother got very, very sick, and I found myself transitioning to a co-employment situation, while like doing it from a hospital waiting room. My team stepped up and I had to let go of control because I couldn't physically be everywhere all the time. I couldn't be a 24-hour nurse and do everything else that I needed to do simultaneously. And I had to let go. And I empowered the team to just make decisions. Look, you know how this business works. It's your department and you run it. And now we've got a leadership team where everybody's got their area of expertise. We all meet a couple times a week and everybody goes out to run their team. And that has worked out incredibly well for me because as we've brought in new people onto our leadership team, it's less of me having to feed them all of the information that they need, but they have this team of resources, right? They have the people under them, but they have the people on the leadership team that they can reach out to, and everybody's kind of got a different area and expertise. And we've got a young, energetic team. I'm the oldest person in the company at this point, which sounds a little strange to say, but I am at this point the oldest person here. And being that, everybody's a little bit younger and hungry and energetic, I've found ways to empower them to make those decisions. So if we're in a meeting and they're telling me about a problem that they're facing in their department, I don't tell them what the answer is. I ask them what they selected. What solution did you select? You just gave me all the options. What's the best solution? Right. And I feel like at first it was provide me with the solutions, and then I'll pick. But now that we've been doing that for a couple of years, pick the solution. You have to live. Look, you have to live with the result of your decision. You're going to have to live with the system change or whatever is happening. That's your, piece of the business now. So what did you decide? And I think the first couple of times I did that really started to further empower the team. And when I saw how powerful that was, Now, I don't want to say you delegate your whole job, but enable your team to make decisions in your absence. You can't be on the road all the time at all these conferences and be everything to everyone all the time and not empower your team around you to support you. Otherwise, you're still a sole operator. And I
It's way
did sole
easier said than
operator
done,
here.
Adam. I couldn't agree with you more. And I think it's, but you make some really good points. And it's critical that you're able to make that, distinction, that delineation between capable people and capable teammates. Right. And I think that there's being able to trust and being able to build someone up to make those decisions is like I said, oftentimes it takes a little time. It's not something that happens tomorrow, but once you've approached that, speaking from experience, it definitely allows you to focus on things that really drive new and innovative ideas, which is really what it comes down to, right, Adam? You are, to wrap it up in the too long didn't read version, I cannot thank Mr. Adam Parks, CEO of Adam Parks Incorporated, Branding Arc, and a host of other veritable philanthropic enterprises, which we can't touch on in this particular episode. Maybe we could. But I want to thank Adam for his time today on the Receivables Roundtable. I can't tell you what an honor it is to be able to host the show where I get to interview the man behind the lens most of the time. It's a tremendous honor. Adam, I can't thank you enough. Certainly look forward to the future and what the future may hold.
Absolutely, Mark. I appreciate you coming down to Florida and participating. What a special way to celebrate 100 episodes. Honestly, never thought this was something that was ever going to happen.
I demanded the spiral tree. I demanded it.
I think this was a lot of fun. I really appreciate it.
Oh,
For
100%.
those of you that are watching, if you have additional questions that you'd like to ask us, you can leave those in the comments below, both here on LinkedIn and YouTube, or you can leave additional topics that you'd like to see Mark and I talk about in the comments below as well. I'm sure Mark can come back and continue creating great content for a great industry going forward. Until next time, though, thank you everybody for watching, and we'll see you on episode 101.